breaking news at this hour. President Biden announcing on social media he's dropping out of the race. He will not seek re-election.
That's right. This happened, I'd say, a couple of minutes ago as we were getting ready to end the newscast. We now go to News Nation. Well, they'll be carrying this live as we get more information. Again, President Joe Biden officially dropping out of the presidential race.
Okay, we're going to continue working on that, but News Nation is our partner, and they are covering this over on that cable station. And we're going to drop into that broadcast momentarily, but a short time ago, the president putting out a one-page statement on social media, and it's a number of paragraphs, but the key one, he says, quote, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." So this announcement follows a lot of speculation over the last week and the days that have come since a really pivotal moment, which was the debate between Biden and the Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump. It did not go well for President Biden. He said it was a bad night, but there was a lot of speculation that started about his age and his health and if he was the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. And what we saw were Democratic leaders who either said outwardly they thought it was time for someone else, or reports behind the scenes that some of this was being pushed towards. But he has maintained that he was going to continue to run and that he would continue to campaign. A number of setbacks. Most recently, he contracted COVID, so he's been in Delaware dealing with that.
Canceled events.
Yeah, and so then this big moment and this big announcement coming on social media, and he also says in that letter that he's going to say more about this.
Yeah, he says he's going to speak to the nation later this week in more detail, but in the next paragraph he says, "For now, let me express my deepest gratitude." We're looking at photos of him and our Vice President Kamala Harris, and that's who he's talking about here. "To those who have worked so hard to see me reelected, I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me." So again, this coming just this hour, a couple of minutes ago, at the end of the 10 o'clock hour, that President Joe Biden, if you're just tuning in now, has officially dropped out of the presidential race. And we're going to hear from him, he said, later this week. But this is News Nation you're looking at now. They're having some audio issues in this moment, but we just wanted to bring this information to you live. This is all we're seeing at this point. President Joe Biden did post to all the social media accounts. That's how we were first alerted of what is happening. But a lot happening this week.
Yeah, a lot happening.
Between the attempted assassination of Trump, then you had the RNC, and you had now this, and as you mentioned, President Biden also contracting COVID during all of this, so we didn't get a chance to hear from him in his events this week.
Yeah, so what we do know, though, is that the Democratic National Convention is coming up, and what isn't determined yet is who is going to be the Democratic nominee for the presidential race. So what the speculation has been from different experts that have been talking about this would be that Vice President Kamala Harris would sort of be the next in line to run, but that it could go different ways and that it could be determined at the convention. And so that's something that's going to be a big question is who is the nominee going to be? But we now know that President Joe Biden is not going to run. So this is really big news. It follows some reporting also that had come out that I saw early this morning that his family was talking, and they were talking about how he was going to, how a possible exit could go, and that was, something that was being discussed, and those were the reports that were not coming, from his family, but that, were behind the scenes from sources. So, this is a really big announcement that we're hearing now, and this will really dictate a lot. This comes, the RNC just this week. This is when, of course, Donald Trump, who has been the presumptive Republican nominee, this is when he, got the official nomination of his party, gave an hour-and-a-half speech there, talked about his assassination attempt, and appeared with a bandage on his ear where, part of his ear was shot or grazed by a bullet in that assassination attempt.
And then his vice president officially made nominee J.D. Vance. There with him on stage. And so we've heard and learned a lot about the Republican side of all of this, but as you mentioned, with the DNC coming up, I'm sure, now we will, I'm sure, hear from much more what's happening there. But I'd be interested to know what's going to happen in the coming hours. President Joe Biden did say in that one-page statement, as you mentioned today, that he is going to be speaking later this week, but I'd be curious to know if he's going to speak earlier than that.
And we have heard from him in recent days. He did make remarks following the assassination attempt, denouncing political violence, denouncing all of that, and talking about how he had reached out to Donald Trump, and we learned that they had spoken. So, we have heard from him, and then, in recent days, this COVID diagnosis. So we are working to get some programming from News Nation, because they're following that on the cable channel. But here's a statement that he put out a short time ago on social media. And, as you can see, he addresses it to my fellow Americans, and he begins talking about, some of the accomplishments that he, feels he has made in his time, during this term in office.
Yeah, he says, I know none of this could have been done, as you mentioned here, without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. He ended that letter that you're still looking at now by saying this: I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. Wow. This was, again, posted today, coming down 10 o'clock hour at the end of it. It's now 11, almost 11:10 on this Sunday morning. I always think about timing with all of this, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the DNC coming up later this week. And then on a Sunday, on a Sunday morning, and there was, of course, you see all these things on social media like, oh, there was speculation, we're using that word a lot, speculation that this weekend conversations were happening and people were saying, but you never know what's true until you hear it.
Oh, yeah,
from the
absolutely.
mouth of the president.
Absolutely.
So this is his news to break.
Yeah, and it comes, following escalating pressure from within his party, to drop out, that perhaps another candidate would be better suited to try to beat Donald Trump at the ballot box. And this all follows, it was June 27th. Excuse me, when that debate was held. So this conversation has really been going on since then. The president at 81 years old, his age being a big question, concerns about that, concerns about the answers that he gave to some of those questions, and, sort of an inability at times to, finish his thoughts, in a way that made sense. The president, though, has been touting his achievements in office, and he's been saying, leading up to this point, that he just felt that that there was more to do, and he wanted to finish out the job, and he felt he was the best person to do it. He does plan to serve out the remainder of his term in office, which does end at noon on January 20th, 2025. Of course, the November election and who is the Democratic nominee is now going to be the big question. And of course, Megan, as you mentioned, what the president says when he addresses the nation about this, because right now we're just hearing it in a statement. We're seeing this letter, but he has not yet spoken about it, and he didn't say exactly when that would be, but he said more to come. So he's planning to address it and address this, huge development.
Yeah. He's been home in Delaware with COVID symptoms. We know that happened when he had to cancel an event. He's been facing pressure to exit the race, following what we've been mentioning. And now we do want to go to, we're going to listen into what's happening in News Nation. Do want to go to, we're going to listen into what's happening in News Nation. Do want to go to, we're going to listen into what's happening in News Nation. That's not working. Well, that's the plan always. That's what you're looking at now, at least. Yeah,
Marianne Williamson, who has run for president in the past, is speaking there. We can't hear her. We're having some technical issues that we're working to work out, because we want to bring you some of this continuing coverage that News Nation, which is part of the Nexstar family, part of the KTLA family, our national cable network. We want to bring you some of the breaking news that they are talking about.
It's 11:11 on this Sunday. If you're just tuning in because you've seen all of the chatter on social media, then just know President Joe Biden has officially dropped out of the race. We will be back with more from News Nation about this breaking news on this Sunday morning. Thank you for tuning in with us. We'll be right back.